Okay, so for this activity, you are going to explore different kerning and tracking and letting of text. So in class, we went over what each of those meant as it goes with typography. So kerning is the individual space between any two letters. When we talk about tracking is equal amount of space in between all letters of one word. So tracking you can actually do in between specific letters, or you can do a whole word at the same time, and that is just, again, the spacing between each letter in a word. Letting is the space between lines of text. So we will navigate how to do a little bit of each one of those, and hopefully that gets you in a good mindset for your quotable portraits project, which you will be starting next class period. All right, so what we're going to do is you should have saved the image that was in the Canvas assignment. So this assignment is called Character and Kerning Activity. And once you right-click it and save it, you need to open up Photoshop and you need to go to File, Open. So whether you go up at the top and click Open and then select the image that you downloaded, or from the actual startup screen, there is a button on the left that says Open. You will say that and you will open up the image. And it looks like this. Okay, so if I were to print this out on just a standard sheet of paper, it should print out 8.5 by 11. So you'll notice as I zoom in that it will start to pixelate, but no worries, it's okay. It's just because it's at a an aspect ratio that's not necessarily the highest, but it gets the point across. And if you listen, you'll just be able to hear what you're supposed to do. So we're going to zoom in on this first rectangle here. Now, we're going to select our type tool. You can either hit T on your keyboard, or you can just go over here on the left and select it. And we're going to just hit anywhere. Okay, so right now it says in a serif or sans serif font. So right now I have it in a sans serif font. Now what that means is that it means without tails. I'm gonna just reset a few settings real quick, so just don't pay any mind to what I'm doing quite yet. Should. Okay. So as you can kind of see that you got a little hint right there of what the tracking is. So, but sans serif means that it's without tails. If I were to change this over to Baskerville or even Academy Engraved, it has these little tails. Let's see, another example is Big Caslon. Okay, another one is Times New Roman. A serif font has these little intricate tails that go off of certain letter forms, okay? And a sans serif, again, is without those. So I'm going to just go ahead and switch over to a pretty bold font so we can see it nice and clearly. All right, so this is standard text, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you first how to quickly copy and paste any sort of layer, okay? So you can do this with text layers as well. So if I hover over with my move tool selected, if I hover over this word, anywhere where my move tool kind of points to on that, I can hold down Alt, click, and drag. Okay, so that makes a copy of that text. Now what we're going to do on this one, it says type the word hello with a tight tracking. Okay, so again, tracking is that space between each letter. So when I highlight this, it is going to do a tighter tracking within these spaces. Okay, so that means that that space is going to get smaller. Okay, those letters are going to be closer together. If you go over here, you might have your character icon over here already. If you do, you can click on it and it brings up the character window. Or you can go up to window and make sure character is selected. Now, this emblem right here is what we use for, for the tracking. If I go to the left, it starts to become negative numbers, or it just starts getting lower. So I can make that tighter. So as you can see, there is a difference between those two words. Now we're going to zoom in on this rectangle, and it says type the word hello with a wide tracking. Okay, so I'm going to Alt, click, and drag so that I can make a copy. I'm going to double click to highlight my text, and I'm going to go back to this emblem right here. It looks like a highlighted VA with a back and forth arrow. And if I click and drag to the right, then it becomes wider in the kerning, or the spacing between each letter. Okay, so you can see if I zoom out, there's a difference. Now we're going to zoom in on this one right here. Okay, I'm going to Alt, click, and drag. And I apologize for any background noise that's about to happen. Footballers are going down the hallway, so it might get a little loud. Okay, so hopefully you can hear me, even though there is some background noise. So we are going to kern the H wider from the rest of the word. So that means that we're going to have more space between the H and then the rest of the word. In order to do this, we are going to highlight the H. Now, what I just did is, from the move tool, I double clicked to activate my type tool. It highlighted the whole word. I don't want that, so I'm going to just click off, and you see I have that cursor that is blinking, and I'm going to click and drag over the H. I'm going to use the tracking, and I'm going to make it wider. So that is just going to change that space in between the H and the E. Now we're going to do the same thing, except for we're going to change Alt, click, and drag. We're going to do the H and the E kerned tighter than the rest of the word. So the first thing we need to do is we need to highlight the H and the E. And we are going to bring that slider to the left. Well, as you see, it also did the E and the L. So I can just highlight the E, and I can change that space. Okay. I'm also going to just experiment real quick and see if just doing the H and the E, H Okay, so I could have just highlighted the H and the E, or just the H and then done the tracking, and then I can do the E and then change that spacing. Okay, so you should have something like this. So either way that you choose. Okay, now we're going to find a cursive font. Now I'm going to select my type tool, and I have to click down with my type tool first, because if I just go and change my font, it is actually going to change the font of the previous active text layer. So it's important that you, if you're wanting to do a new text layer with a different type of font, that you click down with your type tool selected. And I'm sorry, it's a long day. Whew. You will see your other font that you had, and you can go and you can change it. Okay, so I'm going to use one called Sign Painter, and as you can see with this one, all of these nice letters are connected. Okay, so with cursive fonts, that's usually what we see, is that the letter forms are designed so that they connect with one another. So I'm going to type the word hello. This is what it looks like with the auto kerning that programs will do. Okay, but I want to highlight this, so double click on it, and I want to space out that kerning between all of the letters. So I'm going to track it, and you should see that these areas where they're supposed to connect, there's actually space. So this kind of breaks that cursive pattern. So it's really important that when you are typing up something, and depending on the look and the design that you want and the communication that you want to say to your target audience, that you have the proper kerning. And so when it's supposed to be in cursive, and it's supposed to have this nice fluid look for whatever design purpose it is, that you would need to stay consistent with that kerning and not space it out too much. And the same goes for a tight tracking or a tight kerning. Okay, so I'm going to alt click and drag that, and I'm going to squish them a little bit more together. Now it's kind of hard to see because it's a little pixelated, but if I zoom out, you'll see a little bit better. But you'll see that those little tails that are supposed to connect nice and evenly with those other letters are too scrunched. They're actually really hard to read. So again, you just want to know what you're trying to convey and what you're trying to, even just the style of the font that you might download or whatever. You've got to be aware of how it will look with different types of kerning, and if that is going to communicate what you want to communicate to your target audience at any given time. All right, so we're going to zoom in on this rectangle right here, and you can choose whatever font you'd like. I'm going to use Brim Narrow. Okay, and I am going to type the word hello. All right, and those letters are a little crunched together, so I'm going to reset this to 0, and that will auto kern these letters and space them as best as I can. Now we're going to make each individual letter a different color. In order to do that, I'm going to double click but then I'm going to click and drag over one specific letter. Now, you can choose whatever folder from that you would like, and if you select a color, it is going to change that letter. Now, if you go to your color picker down here at the bottom left with your foreground, which is the front color, you might choose that you want to do something a little bit more custom. And you might want to save that for another time that you might want to use it again, so you don't have to keep going and trying to guesstimate what that color is. Well, in your color picker, once you have your color selected that you really like, you can add to swatches. And let's say if I was doing my quotable portraits assignment, maybe this is going to be a good eye color. Maybe add a mid-tone if you're getting super detailed with the eyes. So it just depends on what your picture is. So I'm just showing you how to label it so that you can go back and say, oh, that's what I used for the eyes. Click OK, and it pops up down here in your swatches panel. Again, if you don't see this, you can always go to Window, and you can make sure swatches is checkmarked. All right, so we have kind of this rogue color. It doesn't have a group at all. So here's where you can actually make specific groups for different projects. So I had to click off of this letter so that I could get back to my move tool and be able to do this. So I have this little folder at the bottom of my swatches panel, and it says create new group. I can name this for whatever project I'm working on. So quotable portraits is going to be our next project. And now I have a folder. Well, this color isn't in there yet, so I just have to click and drag it to that folder. And now I actually have a folder for that specific project, and I can go there and I'm like, oh, okay, awesome. And as you can see, if I hover over it, it shows what I named that color. Okay, so that is a good thing to remember going forward if you have to have an established color palette for any future projects. All right, so go ahead and color whatever you want for the rest of these letters. This is something that you might have to do for your quotable portraits, just to establish different shadows and highlights and midtones of different areas of your celebrity photo or your character photo, whatever you choose. Okay, so you should have something like this. Now the last thing is we need to type out these sentences. Now, whether or not you believe these to be true or not, we are going to type them because that was just what was on my brain. So I might be a little biased, but I'm just kidding. Okay, so I'm going to reset my color back down to black and white. And you can do that. There's like this little emblem right here that just means to go back to the default foreground and background colors. And then I'm going to hit my type tool. I'm going to click down. Now that is very big. We want to get it in some sort of readable font. So I am going to use Big Caslon. And 36 point is probably not going to be the best size. Okay, so I'm going to go down to size 14. And I'm going to retype this. Okay, so if you feel like it's not going to fit on 3 different lines, you can break it up. So every time you need to break it up and add a new line, you just hit enter and just start typing. Okay, so as you can see right now, my alignment is centered. If you don't want that, you can always go over, there's this emblem right here, which is the paragraph panel. It's sometimes tagged with the character panel. And if you wanted to left align it so that everything's lined on the left, all of those beginning letters is lined on the left, you can. You can keep it at centered, or you can check out the right alignment. That's totally fine. So what we're going to do is now we're going to work on this spacing between each line of text. So instead of tracking, which is the space between each individual letter, we are going to navigate letting. Letting is right above where the tracking was. So it looks like an A with an underline and an A with an underline and then a vertical back and forth arrow. Okay, so we're going to set the letting after we select all of our text, and we are going to do a wide letting. It means we're going to have more space in between each line. So I'm going to pull my little tracker to the right, and that's going to create more space. Okay, so we have that. Now I can do the same thing as I did before, and Alt click and drag with my move tool selected. Okay, and I'm going to double click, highlight all of that, and we're going to do a tight letting this time. Okay, I'm going to get it pretty tight. Okay, now this isn't recommended, especially if we're going to be, creating anything that needs to be read easily, or anything that has info or in an infographic or anything like that. Tight letting is going to not be very easily read, okay? So you can see that the tops and the bottoms of each one of these letters, if they go below, like this G is hitting into the top of the A, this L is hitting into the bottom of the I, this H is hitting into the dot or the period after misses. So it really gets it very muddy, okay? So we do need to be careful when we are letting so that those characters, those letter forms don't bleed into the rest of the other lines, okay? And even with wide letting, we've got to be careful that we don't have too much space so that the eye gets confused on where to go, okay? So it's got to make sense based on the different design that you are going to be making. So overall, your worksheet should look something like this. You need to either save it as a PDF, so you can do that by clicking Save As, and you can do that, and you can save it as a PDF, and you can submit it that way, so click Save, or you can File, Export, Quick Export as a PNG, or you can export it as a JPEG. So you have 3 different options. As long as it's a PDF, a PNG, or a JPEG, you are golden. You don't have to name it any specific thing. It can stay at that character kerning activity name for if you want, and then submit it to that activity to get your points. All right, that is it for now.